Good Friday to you. I've decided to take a walk outside, leaving my sick bed. If you've been following my videos, Charles Mackenzie of Infected Blood Australia, you'll know that for a couple of years now I've had broken teeth, and I've tried without success with the COVID-stricken New South Wales Health Service, if that's what really it is. They've made a fiasco of this, and I've ended up with I've got a broken back molar. I was using natural means to try and control it, coconut oil pulling, if you know about that, and that did very well because it was inflamed before and I beat it down. But now, despite all of that, it's just gone on for too long. It's become massively infected. I'm trying to keep it from going to my neck. If it does go to my neck, I'll be going to hospital for an intravenous drip. But I've taken antibiotics now that I was prescribed. I'm not really into antibiotics. This is the first time I've taken them in 30 years, but I had to do so because of the risk to my neck. It's just too dangerous. And so this right here, this is courtesy of the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, who basically contaminated me with Hep C as a kid from an expired blood product that I should never have been given. It had no therapeutic benefit, but it transferred this virus to me. It's been a nightmare. I've still got it today, all these years later. And, dental problems, as I've spoken about in my videos, are just huge for our group. We've got hundreds of people in our group. We've got HIV and Hep C. All of it came from the blood supply, from blood transfusions, and even from blood treatments that people didn't even need to survive. Can you believe it? We've even got members in our group who were given blood by accident. They weren't supposed to be given it. And they got given it by doctors during, doctors who didn't think properly. And it gave them HIV. And other people have got Hep C. Hey, what do you think about that? What about women who are in childbirth and they were given blood to speed up their recoveries, and the blood was contaminated with HIV or Hep C? We've got this, there would have been thousands of women that acquired the deadly hepatitis C virus from childbirth. They're among the biggest number in our group and have been for 30 years. There you go. This is the underbelly, the dark side of the Australian healthcare system. But these are beautiful surrounds. So I don't want to be too morose today. I'm feeling quite a bit better than I did yesterday. Despite failing to see a dentist at the dentist hospital here in New South Wales, I went to see a private dentist who couldn't do anything for the tooth because it's so infected. But he did give me antibiotics and told me we've got to bring the infection down and then we'll look to do the surgery. And I think that's the right plan. I'm happy with that. So I'm out of my sick bed today because even when you're sick, if you can, even though it's counterintuitive in a way, it feels like it, you should try and exercise. Even if you've got cancer, we've got people in our group who've got cancer and they know what I'm talking about. If you can build up the strength, because it helps keep you strong in other ways. And the glorious sunshine, of course, is helping me make that hormone, vitamin D, which is just wonderful. We've a little bit of sunshine here in Sydney, and we've had this, the summer that's just gone by. That has to be the wettest summer I've ever known my entire life. So usually in Sydney, if it's going to rain, it will do so around Easter. So it's Good Friday. Got a little bit of sunshine. Maybe we'll have some rain tonight, but that sunshine is very appreciated. Yeah, and there's been a few people saying that they thought weather manipulation might be involved with all the rain that we've been having. Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that Indigenous Australians in New South Wales have spoken about the floods that we get every 100 or couple hundred years. And they have that in their history. Some people fishing. Don't know if you want to eat any of the fish that came out of Sydney Harbour. And if they're Japanese, you certainly wouldn't want to eat those fish raw. There's a lot of lead. But I digress. Anyway, so the floods that we've had, Hawkesbury River, and of course further up north in New South Wales, Lismore, underwater twice. It's just appalling. And the failure again of Australia's government, the New South Wales government, to actually respond in a timely fashion to those taxpayers in Lismore, underwater, and in other areas of New South Wales. No surprise to me, and frankly no surprise to anyone else in New South Wales after the recent years we've had. The government today is more concerned about these rapid antigen tests and jabs that don't work efficiently and all this sort of baloney. They're basically obsessed with not doing their jobs. They've made a real muck of it. This corrupt relationship between Big Pharma and all these, global sort of medical industrial complex, which has meant that we've lost our sovereignty when it comes to health. And that's the truth. And did you know that there are actually some global links to Australia's cover-up of our deadliest medical scandal? We have enemies of Australia who are involved in covering up what happened down here. And the reason for that is because they were involved. The British government were involved in what happened down here, as were some American interests. You've got the pharmaceutical giant Merck, who in the early 1980s in Australia were using infected blood donors, not just for use in the blood supply to make blood products for haemophiliacs, although those were made by CSL, not Merck. So CSL would get infected blood and make products, and they killed 1,400 haemophiliacs and thousands of people around the world. But Merck would also take the infected blood and they'd use it to make vaccines. As I've said on a number of occasions, vaccines are blood-based. And so here they were recruiting infected donors in the early 1980s. They were advertising sexually explicit publications. No one in the world did that. But that's because, especially for blood donors. But the reason they did it was because they needed the infected blood donors. And they needed it to develop this Hep B vaccine. And the next thing you know, in 1983, the first reports of people becoming infected with HIV come out via the blood supply. But we know that by 1981, the world's media were talking about this strange virus, which, later became called HIV. But they were talking about this strange virus that was afflicting gay men and haemophiliacs. And what were the Australian Red Cross and Merck doing? This strange virus, HIV, they were taking blood from people that they had Hep B, and they were putting that into jabs, making a Hep B vaccine. But they're also putting the spare blood plasma, contaminated blood plasma, back into the blood supply, which went to haemophiliacs. And of course, if you're at risk or if you were infected with something like Hep B in the 1970s or early 1980s, you might very well be engaged in risk activity or have been exposed to something like HIV. And yet the Australian Red Cross advertised in knowing all of this, they advertised in sexually explicit publications. And of course, the Senate in 2004 had a Senate committee look into tainted blood, and they came out and said, it was done with best science advice, and it was done with best health advice. And they had the $140 billion blood products company CSL, who used to be government owned until a corrupt sale in 1994 to get away from the fact they'd murdered so many people. That's not hyperbole, by the way. That's not me trying to be shocking or be an extremist. I'm not into that. I'm very Australian, middle of the road in that way. I don't like extremism. This is the facts. They knew those blood products are contaminated. It's in their own documents, and we've got that evidence, and yet they distributed it to children anyway, and that's murder in my book. It's unacceptable for adults to do that to children. I'm never going to change my view. So, the Australian Red Cross, got a clean bill of health from their corrupt mates in the Senate, and they allowed lies to be told under oath. They allowed their partners in crime, CSL, to say that they'd never ever mixed foreign blood, or that there'd never ever been any cross contamination of foreign imported blood that had been brought in from unhealthy and desperate donors overseas and mixed into Australia's blood products, into Australia's blood supply. And CSL under oath in 2004 lied, and they said that they'd never occurred. And of course, the crux of my evidence, the biggest part of my evidence that I submitted to the Senate on behalf of Australia's tainted blood victims, and in fact on behalf of haemophiliacs, was that the blood had been mixed. I used CSL's own evidence, their own statements, admitting that they brought in blood from Southeast Asia. They used to mix in blood from prisons. Do you want to get your blood from prisoners? CSL used to mix that into their blood products. Okay? And they were given a clean bill of health. That was criminal. This is Australia's biggest cover-up. They're in so much trouble because I've become a witness in an inquiry over in the UK called the Infected Blood Inquiry, and they've worked it out. This was no accident. No. This was people deceiving the public about safety. This was authorities knowingly distributing tainted blood, and that's just the truth of it. And then when the full scope of the scandal emerged in the 80s and 90s, they basically, the whole system, as one witness to the UK infected blood inquiry said, they engaged in a coalition of silence. And that was a Scottish man, Di Thomas Griffiths. And the same man said this man had Hep C from a blood treatment, and he'd developed Hep C and liver problems, and he had to have a liver transplant. He saw that his blood products that he received in Scotland said made in laboratories in Australia. And he also had some that said made in America. This is part of this international blood trade. So Australia's got questions to answer, potentially infecting patients overseas. I wonder how they'll go answering that question when they've denied and lied about the fact they've infected thousands and thousands of people here in Australia. Blood transfusion recipients, CSL blood treatment recipients, the list goes on. And then CSL get to make the AstraZeneca jab. How did that go, eh? How did that go for everybody in Australia? Wow, not so well by judging by reports. And once again, CSL were indemnified. And once again, taxpayers in Australia are abused and not looked after by the health authorities that take our money. And I'm sporting an example of what happens when these people take our money and they don't give us the services. Are you a professional? Are you watching this and have you got a job? Is there accountability in your role? I'm willing to bet there is. I'm willing to bet if you knowingly harmed one of your customers, clients, people at your work, there'd be consequences. Well, I'm here to tell you it doesn't cut both ways when government does it. Yeah, no. And when big organisations do it in Australia, they get free rein. As I said, this looks like I've been in a barroom brawl. And the guy that hit me, or the thing that hit me, was the Australian Red Cross and CSL. And I'll tell you what, I've never struck back, nor has anyone in our group. We've turned the other cheek for the best part of 30 years or more. Well, we're not going to be turning the other cheek in court. We won't use lies, deception, cover-ups, violence, or anything awful. We're going to use the truth. We're going to use facts. They threw a punch at me. They've thrown so many punches at tainted blood victims and at their relatives over 30 years. You wait, when you hear the stories, it's all going to come out. And while they've done this in a cynical effort to carry on their criminal cover-up, we will never, ever do anything like they've done. We're going to operate with integrity. And when we punch back, we're going to do so in the courts. Okay, and it's not far off. I was feeling very unwell yesterday and I contacted our lawyers, and I've let them know, time is precious now. If I don't make it, the group's going to go on, so will the legal action. Okay, so that's one bit of good news for everyone. I was concerned that might not be the case. Don't worry, we're looking good, okay? Whatever happens, justice is going to happen for all tainted blood victims in Australia, victims of Australia's deadliest medical scandal, and their relatives and their loved ones. Justice is coming, it's on the horizon, okay? And it needs to be, it's got to be. This is our nation's deadliest medical scandal and cover-up. We're going to get it sorted. I haven't wasted 30 years of my life doing this for it to come to naught for people. I know that parents lost children. I know, okay? And I thank them for their patience. It's taken a long time for us to get forward, and some of us have been very ill and very poor and all the rest of it. But it's Good Friday, and we're getting closer to justice. And I want to wish you a very sincere happy Easter. I can hear voices in Sydney, picnics. They are families together enjoying themselves. What a beautiful sight after the communist style lockdowns that we're subjected to that have done nothing but harm Australia. And these health officials have really harmed their own cause with their cover-ups and their coercions. And if you could support our call for a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Australian Red Cross CSL blood scandal, we'd be very appreciative. You click on the link in the bio or in the link associated with this video below if you watch another platform. Happy Easter from Charles Mackenzie and everyone in Infected Blood Australia. Thank you.